back to the Pro Physique Code. We got an exciting one today. Me and Lexie are going to talk about all things show day for bikini prep.
Yes, this is going to be an exciting one to talk about. I guess, yeah, we're going to go into all of what to expect on show day and just walk through all the little details. But first, let's talk a little bit about this weekend. I feel like we should chat a little. Well, okay, by the time that this episode is out, it'll have already happened, but we've
Yeah.
got a pretty big local show here happening this weekend in St. Petersburg, the Hurricane Pro AM. And you've got a lot of people competing in this, Paul.
Yeah. So this turned into unintentionally one of my biggest shows of the year. I think it's my biggest. I was trying to think back if I've ever had 10 pros at one show before, and I don't think I have. Yeah.
That's
It's,
a lot.
there was,
10 rows. Wow.
yeah, I think Janet's initial Janet Battle of the Bodies, I think I had 8 do that. It was the first year. It was, Daraja did it. I had a bunch of girls do that show. I think I had 6 or 8. This is 10. And so it's going to be fun. Plus, I've got 3 NPC girls, plus Evan's competing. He's got a couple competitors. Do you have anyone competing?
Yeah, I have a girl who I've
Okay.
coached for a while now. So yeah, she'll be there. I think I may have another client or two just coming.
So,
It's gonna
yeah.
be a big show for Pro Physique. And I mean the Bikini Pro lineup too that they just announced is pretty deep as far as like there's at least 4 that are already qualified for the Olympia this year. Well, I know that this isn't a qualifier for 2023, but we have 4 Olympians on the list.
Qualifier for next year, and not for nothing. That, if you get qualified before the Olympia, it kind of takes the stress off because, as a coach who's been going to the Olympia for a few years now, first thing I noticed going to the Olympia is everybody puts so much effort in getting qualified for the Olympia. After prejudging, they announce who the top 10 are. If you're not in the top 10, your season's over. You don't go to finals and you are not qualified for anything. It is like wiping the slate clean. It's like, remember those old Etch-a-Sketches?
Yes, I do
It's
remember
like you
them.
work on this art project all year and then you just wipe it clean. And you literally have to start from scratch. So, I remember last year, Phoebe Hagen beat Daraja 1 week before the Olympia. That was a nice thing because that gave Phoebe the freedom to wait all year to compete. She did not do a show this year, right? It gave her that ability to focus on growing. And oddly enough, she's actually in this show. So seems like she
Yeah.
likes to do the show before the Olympia.
Yeah. That's a great point. I feel like it's a good strategy to get qualified early because then you can take that time away from stage
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you don't look so tired and run down by the time you get to the Olympia. But because I know Phoebe, what I think she was supposed to do the Arnold this past year, but she actually didn't end
She
up
pulled
doing it.
out.
Yeah.
India pulled out. I think a couple, maybe somebody else, but I feel like, there was a rash of people that pulled out once the list came out and they saw Jennifer Dory, Maureen Blanquisco, Laura Lee Chapados. They saw all those names and they went, oh, because historically the Arnold is usually not the top 5. It's usually, maybe a girl that gets second or third, but then a wide open kind of list. And this year the Arnold was literally, other than Daraja and Amy, it was the same top 5 or top 6, top 7. It was like,
Mhm.
it was like 6 of the top 10. So yeah, I think some of the girls just opted out because it wasn't enough time to make improvements. But the problem with the Arnold is you have to apply for it. It's the only show that's invitation only. So you're kind of going into it blind. Whereas a lot of girls will nowadays go, oh, I see the list, I'm not going to jump into that show. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's always fun to watch, but I'm kind of glad too that they got rid of the point system because I feel like that was running a lot of girls down, just like trying, being so close and continuing to compete and then being just so tired by the end of it.
I have mixed emotions about the point system because the pro bikini division now more than ever, it's win or nothing. There is no benefit to getting second place. Like I've
Yeah.
seen, you saw Jessica Dolius just get qualified. Congrats to her. I've seen her get second so many times. Seeing her win was great, but it also was like, man, she had gotten like 3 seconds this year, you know, and some girls just want to go to the Olympia. So the fact that she got to go is awesome. But I can see making the case for both sides of it. I think as an athlete and as a coach, you've got to do the responsible thing. Um,
Mhm.
you know, I don't know if they'll ever bring it back. I don't think so because there's still like 52 girls on the list. I'm assuming they're all going, and if they are, that's 52. And I think last year was 54, so it's not any different.
Yeah.
Which means, from a strategy, we'll talk about show day stuff.
Yeah.
Not many people have to worry about this, but as a coach on show day, when my athlete comes out for groups, Ariana's going to be in the first group. And then Daraj is usually in that third group. And then Juma will be somewhere up there too. Her last name's D, so she'll be in that second or third group. They go backstage, then they start the routines. That's 52 people that have to do a routine. And that's not a small stage. So I have to make sure that they're fed, that they're, that can be like, I did the math last year. From the time Daraja did her individual or her group, came back out for her individual and was back out on stage, it was over an hour and a half.
Wow. The one thing that I think about as a competitor from an athlete's perspective is like being backstage waiting that long and just having to pee and go to the bathroom. And I mean, I'm sure you have enough time to do that in between, but that's such a great point. That's something I think a lot of people probably don't think about is just all that waiting backstage and how you even approach that as a coach from a food standpoint.
Yeah, we'll dig into that nuts and bolts of like show day. Let's talk about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe we'll do a review of the hurricane for our next one because yeah.
That would be fun. Yeah, I don't even think we mentioned too. I mean, people listening have probably caught on, but Evan's not in this episode because it is his peak week. So
Yeah.
we're giving him a little bit of a break today, before the big day on Saturday. So that's why he's not joining us today. But yeah, I think it would be fun to do a little bit of like a mini recap of Hurricane next week since it's going to be
Yeah.
quite a big show for the whole team. So
We'll have to allow for a little time because I'm sure Evan's going to because that's going to be his only show of the season. I know he's going all out for it. He looks incredible. I went and trained with him last Friday. Actually, I've got a YouTube video coming out today that's going to, talk about his training and his prep and stuff. So just so much good stuff going on with him. He's, no one's outworking him. So I'm excited. And the improvements he made, I posted something on my story the other day, just since I first met him in 2018 till now. The amount of progress that guy has made has been remarkable.
I saw that. That was really awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was awesome.
that's honestly one of the first times I really hung out with him. I was at nationals with one of my competitors, and he was there by himself. And he's like, "Hey, would you take a look at me?" And I took some, and I just happened to take some pictures of him, and I still have them.
Really? I
Yeah.
didn't
So
realize that's what those pictures were from. Okay, what year was that?
2018
Okay.
NPC Nationals, back when it was in Miami. Who was there that year? I had somebody turn pro that year. I believe that was the year April Roby turned pro. 2017 was
Okay.
Lauren Dannemiller. 2018 was April Roby. 2019 was Anne Marie. I always had somebody, or 1 year I had 3 turn pro nationals, but I always had somebody. Nationals was always like a good show for me. And
Yeah,
even
you guys,
last year I had KB turn pro there, so I've always had done well at
right.
nationals.
And Stephen had Sam. So
Damn.
yeah,
Yeah.
now it's in Texas this year. So
Texas, and I've actually got some little rock stars going out to that show as well, so I'm excited for that.
awesome. Cool. Well, where do we want to start with all things show day? Where should we
Well,
start?
let's start with, I guess, let's start with the day before because a lot of the show day stuff starts with what you're doing one day out. So we'll talk from the unexperienced competitor standpoint and then also from the experienced competitor standpoint. So
Perfect.
a common question I get, and I know you get this too, if you're doing a show, when should you get there?
Yeah, this is a very common question. I mean, I think so. Okay, so I'm a little bit of a rarity because I would actually do the opposite of what I tell most people because I just know myself. But for most people, I recommend getting there early as far as not just the day before, like especially if you're flying, try to get there like the Thursday if you can. That way you get there, you have time to get settled, then you have all day Friday to just kind of hang, to chill. Because the risk you run is if you fly in, let's say the day before, you could potentially be retaining some water, digestion may be a little slow. Also, who knows with flights, like your flight could be delayed. You don't want that to be an added stressor. Now, personally, I have done both where I've flown in like 2 days before, so like on that Thursday, but I've also done it where I've flown in Friday morning. But when I flew in Friday morning, it was because I felt totally comfortable doing so. I was with my mom was with me. I felt totally chill, so I was able to get by
Was
with
that
that.
the Austin show this year?
Yeah, yeah, and that was, like, whenever I travel and I have somebody kinda with me, like, I don't stress at all about travel. When I'm by myself, I'm always kinda, like, a little panicked, so I knew that I would be able to get by with just flying in Friday morning, and it ended up not being an issue, but for most people, I would generally recommend if you can get there Thursday, that's gonna likely just be a little bit more beneficial and takes, like, an added stressor off of your plate too, would you agree?
Yeah, so first things first, if you're new to competing, the consultations that we have, and we're always doing free consultations. If you guys just want to talk about, strategy and prep, for a coach, we have that available. But the first conversation I have is like, how many shows have you done? Because for an inexperienced competitor, I always want them competing close to home for their first show, just
Mhm.
because you don't realize how these things add up on the day before the show and on show day, as far as makeup and your hair, your training appointments. You got to get your training in. If you're
Yeah.
traveling, it just adds pressure to get your food. Sometimes, I mean, honestly, I've been annoyed like standing at check-ins. Sometimes you go to a hotel, if it's a show there, they've got a bunch of people trying to check in at the same time. You're at check-ins for an hour, you're hungry, like your mind starts to wander. Am I going to make it to these things on time? So I always like to be ahead of schedule. So for a new competitor, I say do a show in your backyard. So because you can drive over to check-ins, you can drive back, you stay in your own bed.
Yeah.
Um, I even
I
know some competitors that get the hotel just the night before, even if it's in their hometown, just to get out of their house. If they have kids, if they have a busy house, pets. I always
Yeah.
joke around with Daraja because she always feels like she's stress free when she travels, and she only has two dogs, but it's just like a lot, right? So, um,
Yeah, I could see that, and I've done that before too, like with the Tampa Pro. I stayed at the hotel this year, and I lived
Yeah.
like
And
10,
sometimes you
15
just want to be in there and be the experience it. Sometimes you don't. It just depends on the situation, but I'm all for the get the experience your first show. Go all in. Be there, go to the athletes check-in meeting. We'll talk about that. Do all the things. Get really involved in the sport. Heck, even go meet people. So, first tip for a first-time competitor, do a show close to home. First tip for a experienced competitor who is now going to a bigger show, a regional show, they want to get in front of a big name judge, they want to go to a national show. If the show is Saturday, get in Thursday evening, wake
Mhm.
up Friday totally relaxed.
Yes, and I think another note to make is because I know I've heard of people doing this before, and when you start traveling for shows, sometimes it's exciting because you're traveling maybe to a new city you've never been to. Like for example, when I went to Austin, I'd never been to Austin before, but I think you have to also make sure that you're not like being a full-on tourist like Friday and walking around the whole city and like doing all that like touristy stuff, because really on Friday you should be relaxing. You shouldn't be overexerting yourself. So if you go to a new city, I typically say like don't take, do all the touristy stuff. Plan to do that after the show, not the day before.
Oh no. I think people that do that, they don't realize, and I think our clients would not have this issue because we talk a lot about step counts and things, but
Oh yeah.
I've definitely had clients do too much activity the day before the show. I've had a few very frustrating clients that I said, "Hey, get an Uber," and they refused to get an Uber and they walked in the heat, and then
Oh,
they're dehydrating, and yeah, the body's pretty sensitive when it's stage lean, so you want to kind of control your variables. So
yeah.
be be a diva.
I like that. Be a
Be a
diva.
diva. Like, listen, be narcissistic, take pictures, ask your friends for help, ask your coach for help. People like when I go to a show, people, my clients are like, "Oh, I don't want to bother you." I'm like, "Listen, I want to be useful. Give me a bag to carry, give me a suitcase to push. Ask me where the good lighting is. Even if you don't know me, even if you're not my client, just be like, "Hey, have you been to this show before? Do you know where this thing is?" I like to be useful. I honestly feel quite useless on show day, other than saying like, "Hey, are you peeing a lot or how's your pump?" Like the work is kind of done on show day. So I like to help out. And so athletes, I would say try to put yourself first. Some people have trouble doing that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, it should be about you that day, and I agree. I think some people like I would consider I'm kind of this way. Sometimes, like, we have a hard time letting other people do things for us, but I think if there's any day to let others do something for you, it's show day. I mean, you worked so hard for that day,
Yeah.
and I agree with the whole like taking pictures. Some people think, oh, it's vain to like be taking all these pictures, but you are gonna regret it if you do. I
Oh
promise
man.
you. Like, if you don't get like it's so fun to get that content and then to look back at it, and you will regret it if you don't take that content, even if you don't feel like it in the moment. If you're kind of stressed, nervous, anxious, like, just do it, because it's going to be so fun to look back at over time.
Okay, so let's make that point number two. So point number one, pick a show close to home or get there a day ahead to make things less stressful. Point two, things to do on show day, things to know on show day. Be in the moment.
Yes, be in the moment and be a diva.
And
Yes.
so that's what I mean by that. I mean take pictures. If you see somebody who looks like they could use some help, offer help. If you see somebody that looks like they want to have a conversation, have a conversation. I don't think you realize until after the show is over that the people that are at the shows with you, those are the people that get along with you the best generally. Like, um,
Yeah,
they get you. We get each other.
they do.
Almost
They
all of
do.
my acquaintances and my close friends now come from the world of competition. And that's not to say I don't like other people. It's just that, like, you tend to like hang out with the people that get you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always try to talk with people backstage, and like I meet some of the coolest people backstage. I mean, I can think back to the two shows this past season, like specific people in general that I met backstage and just hung with and chilled with, and they weren't, even on Team Pro Physique, but it's just really fun to like sit back and mingle. And plus, usually you have a lot of time backstage, so it kind of helps to pass the time to make friends, and also it just kind of, in my opinion, it helps to ease nerves if you can just chat with people, kind of hang out, rather than going into the corner and being silent and just not talking to anybody.
Yeah, and I think the being in the moment thing can be hard, especially at your first show, because you're worried about, okay, when do I pump up? When do I go backstage? So, um, these are the kind of things, like, as a coach, if I can be there, if I can be on a phone call, I love to provide that support. But there's also this feeling, I just want people to be realize, no matter what, your first show, you're not going to be comfortable. There's
Yeah.
just too many unknowns. So when people tell me they're nervous, I say good. And they go, "What do you mean good?" I go, "That means you care. You've put a lot of time and energy into this." Being nervous and anxious is just energy that, if you worry too much about it, it can be detrimental, or you can turn it into something positive.
Agreed completely. Yeah, and I think the more and more shows you do too, you start to learn kind of what makes you stress the least. Like, you'll start to learn little things that you can do that can kind of help to ease your nerves. Whether that be always getting your makeup done by a professional, because that makes you less nervous, or eventually maybe you learn to do your own makeup because that eases your nerves and puts one less thing you have to go to in the morning on your plate. So yeah, you kind of learn what you get in your groove just the more shows you do, and you learn what works best for you as an athlete.
Yeah. All right. So we've got two good tips. Do a local show, things to know on show day. Let's actually talk about the experience of going to a show from start to finish. I think that's probably the best, where we'll get into like the nuggets. So
Yeah.
the first thing that you're going to do when it comes to a show after you register is you're going to go to check-ins on Friday. Um, Pretty much every show that I'm aware of does an in-person check-in, especially if you're in a division that they need your height and weight, which is most divisions. So at check-ins, they're actually going to, let's say that check-ins are from 4 to 6, right, for the show. I always suggest trying to get there as early as possible. Um, and the other thing I'll say is, don't stress if you can't get there between 4 and 6. Just let the promoter know, let your coach know. Sometimes we can, get stuck at work, those kind of things. But what check-ins are is, it's going to be all the athletes going through, showing their NPC card. So make sure you have your NPC card before you go. It's very easy to get that. Once you show up, they'll ask you for your card. They'll ask you what classes you're in, right? They'll say, "Oh, okay, I see you've signed up for novice and open bikini. I also see that you're 35. Do you want to add master?" So they'll offer you other classes that you might want to do. What do you tell your clients, Lexie, as far as like, "Oh, what classes should I do?"
So I work with a lot of first time competitors. And so let's take a first time competitor first and foremost. I always say true novice, because that is for first time competitors only, and you're never going to be able to do that class again. So true novice, and then I typically will have them do open, and those two, like for their first show, those are the minimum ones I usually recommend them doing. But a lot of times I'll also have clients that want to do novice, so they're doing true novice, novice, and open. And then in some instances, I may have a master's competitor who wants to do the master's class. But the reason I like, for first time competitors, like if you can do do true novice, do open. If you can do novice, do it, because what I generally find is that not true novice goes on first, right? So that first time competitor gets on stage, they're really nervous, but after true novice, they feel a little bit better because they're like, oh, I did it. They got a little bit of their jitters out. Then they go on for novice because that goes in on next, and they feel a little bit more comfortable, still a little nervous. And then by the time they go on for open, though, which is usually going to be like the biggest class that they're going to compete in, they're a little bit less like nervous and jittery. So that's typically what I recommend for my first time competitors. And then after that, it's kind of a matter of, obviously a competitor who's already competed can't do true novice again. So if it's a client who's not eligible for masters, they're always doing open and maybe doing novice as well if they qualify for that. So that's typically how I set up my first time competitors, at least.
Yeah, the way I kind of frame it is this. You work for years putting on muscle, you work for months taking off fat. Some of these classes, especially bikini, it's two poses, and if there's only a couple girls in your class, you might be on stage for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So, especially at your first show, I always say do every single class you have the opportunity to do if it's not a financial burden, right? So I'm not saying like
Yeah.
go broke, but if you've already prepped, you're already at the show, you've already registered, it now only costs you another $200 to do a class, 150, whatever the number is. So to me, it's kind of silly to not add that class because you get to come on stage with one class, go backstage, catch your breath, realize like, oh my God, I was so nervous. Then this feeling of um, happiness washes over you. I did it. And
Yes.
then you go line back up and you go back out and you are a completely different athlete. I can't even tell you how many athletes go out
Uh-huh.
the second or third time. Their posing is better. They smile more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then that's exactly what it is. Like I hear from a lot of my first time competitors all the time. They'll be like, "Okay, true novice, I know I was really shaky, I was really nervous, but by open, I felt so much more confident. My stage presence was on." So yeah, I feel like just as a first time competitor, at least if you can do true novice, novice, and then by the time you go on for open, that's the third time you're back on stage, and you just feel a lot more comfortable and like in your element.
Yep. Yep. And that's really what you want to get out of it because it's almost like you've done multiple shows at the same show. Because if you just do one class, you got to wait at least another week to do another show.
Yeah.
And go through all the hair and the makeup stuff. And I'll give you a really good example. So last year at the Clash, I had a true novice named Savannah compete, and she walked out for true novice, and her tan was off. Her suit was bunched up real funny. Um, her physique was phenomenal, right? So she did very, very well in the true novice class. She came backstage. I was able to have CJ from CJ's Elite Suits help her fix her suit.
Mhm.
Um, Came back around for novice again, got moved in, and then for open, by the time she walked out for open, she was kind of a fine-tuned athlete. And I think here's what some people don't realize: the open class might be the least competitive class you do, because in the NPC at some of the bigger shows, you're going to have 8 bikini classes, A through H. If you do true novice or novice, there might only be 2. So I've seen it before where there's like 20 girls in true novice and like 6 in open. So I've seen girls get like 5th in true novice and 2nd in open.
That's a great point. Yeah, because it depends. Like every show usually splits up the open classes a little bit differently, but some shows you have a lot of open classes. So those divisions end up being really, really small. And then you see the true novice or the novice classes and they're huge. Yeah, that's a great point to make. Yeah. So yeah, so going back to check-ins too. So like obviously for bikini, if you're listening and you've never competed before, they don't take your weight, they just take your height. I always joke that I feel like a lot of competitors say this too. I'm sure you've heard this before, Paul, but I always joke that you're almost like a different height at every show because they
Oh
only
yeah.
for me a little differently. Like at Texas, I was 5'2" and 1/4. At Tampa, which was literally a couple weeks later, I grew like an inch. And so it's so funny because you may think you're one height, but then they measure you and you learn that you're actually a different height for that day.
Yeah, what's funny is when I first started competing, I think Lauren Conlon actually had a card. It said that she was class G or whatever. Like, so like when she would go to nationals, they would just check her. She already had her card. They don't do that anymore, but you would basically get measured by the NPC once at a national show, and that was your height forever.
Oh, I like that.
Now, if you're at a local show, remember, sometimes there's not 8 classes. If they only have 30 girls, they're going to do 3 classes of 10 or 4 classes of, 7 and 8. And so you might be class C at one show and class E at another. It just depends on how they're breaking it up. But yeah, so don't get hung up on your height. Don't get hung up on any of that stuff. At the national level, that's where I'll really try to work with the check-in people to make sure my girls are in the right classes. I'll Jedi
Yeah.
mind trend them. I'll say like she's class C. Yeah.
It was kind of weird too because actually at Tampa, I was definitely enrolled as class D, and that is what I thought I was going to be in because that's what my height is. But they ended up putting me in class C like last minute. So sometimes they'll like change your classes when they measure you, depending on what you enrolled online with, and then what they're actually measuring you at. Another question I get a lot from competitors because I feel like a lot of show promoters will tell athletes to do this, but for bikini, they'll sometimes tell you to like wear your suit to check-ins.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Paul, but I've never really seen them do. I always tell my girls bring your suit bottoms just in case, because I think once in a blue moon they may want to check your suit bottoms, but I've never seen them actually like
No.
have athletes put
Now, I
on.
think the sport has progressed to the point now where the pros are wearing such small bottoms that they cannot then say like, "Oh, your bottoms are too small." You cannot have pros in the top 4 at the Olympia wearing micro pro cut and then tell a girl at a regional show or a national show your bottoms are too small, right?
Yeah.
I think the bikini division, obviously, it has the potential to be over sexualized and these kind of things, but I think as the sport has progressed, we now, at least from my perspective, we look at it much differently. We are judging the physique. So at this point, I don't remember the last time I heard somebody tell me that they had to wear their suit bottoms.
Yeah, I don't either. But I always get that question from like my first timers, especially. They'll be like, "Hey, I don't know where it says it, like on the promoter's website. I don't know, but it typically will tell them to like bring their suit."
I
And
think some of that's old literature, like they just don't update
I
it.
think so.
Listen,
I
I
think
will
so.
always say bring it, because the worst thing can happen is you go to check-ins and they're like, "Oh, we need your suit bottom." Then you got to drive back to your Airbnb and drive back and park again.
Right.
So just have a suit with you. And here's what I always thought about was funny about that. You go to check-ins in a suit. They go, "Cool, this suit is cool." There's nothing preventing you from changing your suit. Like they don't mark it. They don't say you have to wear this suit. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, so like for an example, so I used to play competitive softball, which sounds like an oxymoron, but we used to have like the bats would have to be tested because some of the bats would be too good, right? The ball would go too fast off of it. So when they would test your bat, they would put a sticker on it and write on it, and you had to bring that bat to the game. If you didn't have a bat with a sticker and a date on it, you couldn't play. So like I always thought it was funny, like these girls would go to check-ins and they'd check the suit and be like, "Oh, your suit's too small." Okay, and then wear a different one. I'm like, well, what's stopping them from just swapping it out the next day?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always say, and this is another kind of little show day tidbit, if you can, and I understand, especially newer competitors may not be able to do this, but if you can bring an extra suit and just have like a backup suit on hand with you at the show, I always recommend doing that. That always saves me a lot of stress because I always panic and worry, like even just going to the bathroom, pulling up my suit bottoms. You just never know what could happen. So that is little piece of advice. If you can, again, I don't this is not like I didn't do this at my first couple shows, but as you compete more and more and maybe you get, couple of suits, I always say bring one just with you just in case, just to have for peace of mind and just nerves.
Yeah, and I mean honestly, like you have to have a backup suit. You have to, because they break, and if you don't have somebody like CJ with you there, you don't want to just not be able to compete. And honestly,
Yeah.
like I know we get caught up in like the stones and then this and that. They're judging the physique. Like
Yeah.
if you are that much better than somebody, they're not going to mark you down because girls like, Ariana and Juma, they can wear off the rack suits and win a show. Like,
Yeah. They
obviously they don't want to do that, but that's they're judging the physique. We do want to glamorize it a lot, that's part of it, but ultimately they're not marking someone down because their suit doesn't have enough stones.
Yeah, the only thing I have seen, and you can probably chime in on this, and the thing I think is really important, like if you're a first-time competitor, just a competitor in general, this would be a question I would definitely seek your coach's advice on, but it would be the bottom coverage, because I feel like if you get a suit that has too much coverage, that can, I mean, potentially hide.
Oh yeah, yeah. Now the cut of a suit, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
Let's plan another episode around
Mhm.
bikini prep, maybe, current suits, hair, makeup, like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. We could do that
Plan.
specifically. I want to
Okay.
keep this to show day stuff. You're not, but
Yeah.
yeah, the cut of your suit is probably one of the most important factors. Um,
It is, yeah. So, okay, so we talked about check-ins and
so
okay, so
let's just go through the day by day. So once you get
yeah,
checked in, what's next? So, um, you know, I Lexie, you know this. I know you've talked about this. You do a lot of content around this stuff, but I like the day before the show for my athletes to be active. I know sometimes people will be like, no training, no nothing the day before the show. I just believe athletes are such a creature of habit that if you just completely change a variable, like don't go to the gym at all, don't do any cardio, um, especially with potentially with food going up. Um, I know at Tampa, I saw you the day before Tampa, and I thought, you looked a little off, right? You looked a little softer to me. So we pulled out some food, we added some cardio, we added some back in the next day versus other athletes. I upped their food. So, like for me, the day before the show is a very important day. Um, so I would say, like, if you don't have a coach or if you're not sure, just kind of continue on. I would just really reduce the intensity. Don't burn through your food. Just do a light little training session.
yep, yep. I do that with all my athletes too. And usually I'll have a step goal for them. On Friday, a step goal that keeps them active, but also a step goal that makes sure that they're not just,
Yeah.
walking around town for too long. Yeah, so I agree with you. I like to have athletes train the day before too. Nothing crazy or
Nope.
intense,
Just
unless they are like super super striated maybe in their glutes,
oh
maybe
yeah, I
having
have
them
done that before.
train, yeah, maybe having them train glutes really heavy so that way they get a little bit of inflammation in the glutes and so it can kind of fuzzy out those striations. That would be
Yeah.
the only only different case.
Yeah. Okay. So you go to check-ins, you've done your training, you've done your check-in with your coach. Here is probably one of the most underrated tips. Buy dark sheets.
Yes.
So every
Yes.
hotel has white sheets. And if you go to your hotel with white sheets and you lay down with your protein on, I don't care if it's just your pillow, you're going to wake up with orange stuff everywhere.
Yes, that is such a great point. Bring dark sheets or just an old pair of sheets that you have,
Yeah.
because otherwise you will probably get charged by the hotel. Because
It's
like
so cheap. I've literally done it the day of the day before. Like when I did my show in Miami, we just stopped at Target. I got a pair of $20 sheets, threw them on the bed, done.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing too, and I have some content on my Instagram about this. So like I won't go too into depth, but of like what to bring for the show day and weekend. But or not closed toed, open toed shoes too. I think
Yep.
that's easy to forget. Like I always bring a pair of sandals or like slippers. That's gonna be really helpful once you get your tan. You can just
Yep.
slide in and out of those all weekend as well.
And something to wear to and from your tan, either like a silky button up or like we have the team cover ups. And that's why we do them because you can just slip it on. You don't have to walk around in your suit, but it's not going to mess up your tan. That's why you see everybody wearing black clothes at a show. If you're not familiar, it's because the tan gets on everything. Now,
Yeah.
protein is water based, so it washes out pretty easily, but you still don't want to just have it everywhere. Um, I would also suggest if you're doing a self tan, for your first show, I would not suggest a self tan. I would have them do it. Um,
I agree with you
but
on that.
buy some surgical gloves or the cover ups because when you do your own tan, your hands will get stained. Like the palms of your hands, for whatever reason, that just does not go away for a while.
Yes, the palms of your hands and another weird area where like my tans always come off just so bizarre. But another area where it like puddles at is like my ankles. I always find that I have like a really dark tan that puddles around my ankles. But agreed with you on the self tanning. Like if you're gonna do something like pro tan DIY, it's awesome. It's amazing for many people, but I would not recommend doing it for your first show. And I would say, if you can, if you potentially want to go that route, try it out beforehand. Because, for example, I'm somebody I'm really pale, and I know at Tampa Pro I was going to do the DIY pro tan, and I quickly realized, like the night before, I was like, "Ooh, I don't think I'm going to be dark enough just because I'm so pale by nature." So I ended up last minute just purchasing the tan package there because I wanted to actually make
Yeah.
sure I was dark enough and that I wouldn't severely stand out on stage. So I think testing it out beforehand, like protein is amazing, and I wish I could do the DIY, but I'm just kind of a rarity, and I'm so pale, and it just doesn't get me dark enough. It gets me like, it gives me like a nice tan that I could
Yep.
walk around with, but not a stage tan. And the last thing I
Everyone's going to have a different kind of
y-
adaptation to that. So that's why I always say do it with the company, because if it's not going well and you're doing it yourself, you're going to have to pay them anyway.
Yep. And it's just nice for peace of mind. Like they're backstage, they're helping you out, and they can touch you up at any
Yep.
time. So it's, yeah, one less stressor. And again, I know a lot of people try to save money, but it is one thing I would recommend just buying. It's gonna save you so much peace of
So
mind.
not only would I have the show tan, I suggest getting the DIY kit because it's so cheap, and putting on a base coat Wednesday and Thursday night. You can't overdo pro tan. It just gets to a point where it just kind of levels off, but you can underdo it where like you can get sprayed on Friday and again on Saturday and it still hasn't really absorbed. So it takes multiple days in my mind. So yeah, that's a big one for me is start early with the tanning.
I agree. And a question, actually, this is something I used to be confused on. But I've gotten asked before, can like you mix tanning companies? And I will say that for Tampa, I tried the Pro Tan DIY, and I did that the like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then Liquid Sun Rays was actually the company who sprayed me. And I asked them too when I got sprayed by them, I'm like, is it gonna be bad that I already have another company's tan on? And they're like, no. So if that's
Yeah,
something
I've done that many times. I've had athletes show up to a show. I didn't like their color. I said, rinse off. Let's have the host company tan you. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's probably the only thing that matters is how you look when you walk under those lights, right? So you got to really do everything in your power to make sure that look. And I've stressed clients out before because I'm like, hey, I need you. I mean, I remember even at North Americans and FISA, I did not like her tan, and they were on like Masters bikini. I said, get in your car. She did the offsite. Go get a tan. Come back. She had like 3 hours, but it was stressful because she was like, "Oh, you want me to?" But it was the right move because she looked better.
Mm.
So I think the most important thing is that you do everything you can to look great when you walk out under there. The tanning is something you're going to learn from show to show and company to company how you respond. Most of my pros, they're doing self tanning and they're just having the host company just do a light, a finishing coat on them, or not at all. Yeah. So yeah, that's a big one. Got to have the sheets. You got to have tan in place. And then, so I think for the night of the show, I really try to get my athletes to go to bed as early as possible.
Yeah. Get some good sleep if you can. Yeah, go to bed early, like lay back, kick your feet up, watch some TV. Like just don't be afraid to be a full-on grandma. I mean, I'm like that anyways, but
Yeah.
like don't be afraid to just
Be a
park.
diva.
Yeah, be a diva. It may be 7 p.m. and still light outside, but like lay down, don't overexert yourself. Getting yourself as calm and relaxed as possible. That way you can get a good night's sleep because unfortunately, you probably are going to have a really early morning the next morning. I mean, I've had makeup appointments as early as 3 a.m. and sometimes there's just nothing you can do to not get that time. You don't usually get to pick your time. I mean, obviously, if it's a later show, and it starts later in the day, you may be able to sleep in a little bit. Like I know for Texas, the Republic of Texas this past year, I was actually able to sleep in because it didn't start
Yep.
until
Listen, the one good thing about bikini is it's always last. So
Mhm.
if it's a fairly decent sized show like Republic of Texas, and I think the pros went on before the NPC bikini started. So you knew you weren't going on till 2. You can enjoy your morning.
Yeah,
Um,
that was
I,
nice.
I will say if it's your first show, go to the athletes meeting, bring all your stuff with you, and just plan to go find a little spot backstage. Show day, everybody sets up their little tribes backstage. You want to find a good spot. It's one of my favorite things to do is I literally will walk around backstage and just trying to find a spot. Okay, like where is a good quick exit to the bathroom? Where can I hear the expediter? Where can I be seen and heard? Do not hide backstage because there is a chance when they're like, okay, novice bikini class D, line up. And if you don't hear them, they will call your number and call your number. They'll even try to walk around and find you, but you hear it all the time. People miss their class. So be in the room where the expediters are if possible.
Yep, and I saw that happen at Tampa Pro. I've never been to a show where I've seen so many people miss their class. Like a lot of people miss True Novice because that show this year went by so quickly for prejudging for
They did
amateurs.
no, yeah, they did no routines in the morning. So just so you guys know, this is something that can change on show day too. When they have a show like Tampa Pro where there's so many pros, they're trying to get through the NPC in the morning rather quickly. They literally just brought everybody out in groups and just moved them around, and that was it. They didn't do routines until night. So yeah,
Yeah.
it went fast.
Yeah, because I remember you called me and I was rooming with Brooke Caperton and you're like, "They're start like get down here now." And
Yeah,
so it was really rushed, but yeah, I think you can never be backstage too early and make friends with the expediters or at least
right.
ask them like if you want to know, hey, what are they currently on? Sometimes even just asking them, do you have any
They'll show
idea?
you the sheets. Like I'll go up to the expediter now, and just be like, "Hey, how many people?" Because like, some people will look at the sheet and be like, "Oh, there's 13 classes between me and my class." They don't realize that 3 of those classes are women's physique classes that no one's in. There might be a very low number in like say a figure class, so there's just one girl, so they just do a quarter turn, she walks off. So now you're down to like 8 classes of girls,
Hmm.
and some of those might be small where they don't have to do a whole lot of moving around and judging. Most
Yeah.
of these judges are so good at their job, they're not keeping people up there for a long time. If it's a tough class, they will. And as a coach, I'm a nervous Nelly on show day. I want everybody backstage because you can't, I've had people miss classes before. Like literally, they were standing right next to me and they didn't go on stage because they were in a conversation. And I'm like, "What did you do?" They're like, "Oh my God," they start crying. And I'm like, that was your class. They're coming off stage now. What did you do?
There was
Yeah.
a girl actually at San Antonio because same format that San Antonio Pro had the same format as Tampa. There was a girl actually who missed prejudging, a bikini amateur, but they let her come back out for finals. And so like she did her individual routine on by herself at finals. Or I guess everybody did their individual, but I've never seen that happen before. But
I think
yeah,
they're DQ'd, so they don't get to place. Um, but I think they'll just let them get on stage and do do their routine. But if they miss prejudging, you're disqualified. It's mandatory. It's not like they can come bring you back at finals and rejudge the class unless um I wouldn't expect that to happen. So just be there ready and early.
yeah,
Um and then remember that the expediters are your friends. Ask questions. They're there to their job is to work with the show promoter to get everyone on stage. So they sometimes can be yelling and be aggressive, but that's just because that's a hard job. You're trying to herd cats and they can't see
yeah.
everyone's numbers. They don't know the difference between a wellness and a bikini and a figure girl. They're backstage going, "What? I'm looking for a, true novice wellness." Like that girl could look like anything. So
Yeah.
they're just trying to guess. So the better shows, the ones that I like the most are like the Clash where it's one big holding area, everyone's in the same room, and they have like taped off areas to line up 2, 3 classes at a time. So they're ahead of schedule. They're not looking for people.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, the backstage people, I mean, all of them, they're all they're really nice. Like you talk to them after a show and they're always like taking a sigh of relief. But yeah, that's a hard job and it's long hours too. But I also recommend when you are backstage, bring like a blanket or bring a yoga mat, bring some stuff that you can just lay out and like lay down on because you may be backstage for a long time and you want to have a comfortable setup. Like you don't want to be sitting on the hard ground and being super uncomfortable. So bring yoga mat, blanket, I mean, heck, bring a blanket because sometimes it gets really cold too. And
Yeah.
I know that's something I've always struggled with backstage being freezing and like you don't really want to be shivering too much right before you go on stage. So, yeah, definitely make yourself cozy backstage.
Yeah, it's going to be a long day. Get comfortable. I also tell girls go out and watch the show a little bit because I think sometimes, especially your first show, it can help to go sit in the audience and see from the audience's perspective, what athletes look like when they walk out on stage. You can see girls that look nervous. You can see guys that look nervous. You can see people that are robotic on stage. And it can maybe open your eyes to like notice who your eye goes to. Sometimes it's not the most conditioned person. Sometimes people just exude confidence or they smile and you're like, oh, look at this person not smiling. Are they angry? No, they're not angry. They're just concentrating, right? So it's just amazing what just a few small gestures on stage can do to change people's opinion of you. And that's, as an athlete, you've only got a few minutes. So I always say, go watch the show. You can also, one of my favorite tricks as a coach is I go watch the show at the beginning. I pick somebody out that I really like their tan. I go find them backstage and I have my athlete walk by and put their arm next to theirs. And I go, ooh, I want to be darker. Because there is different lighting at these shows. Now we're getting really granular. We're talking about like high level stuff that you probably don't need to worry about your first show, but like as a coach, I'm leaving nothing to chance. And so that's something that I like to do. But if you're really light, like if you see somebody on stage and you go backstage and you're way off that, tell the tanning company you want to be darker. I know sometimes they'll be like, oh, but you look so good. I will argue with them. I'll be like,
Yeah.
listen, I'm the coach. I'll take responsibility. You have to remember that the tanning company has been told by the promoter not to make people too dark. So you have to sometimes, as an athlete or as a coach, be kind of pushy with them.
Be a little aggressive, yeah. And same with like makeup. I've heard before girls get their makeup done and then they walk back down to their room and they're like, "Oh, I don't really like my makeup." And it's like
Go
just
back.
tell go
Go
back. You
back.
paid for the service. You don't need to be a full on like Karen about it, but like you can at least just have them make some tweaks because if you're not confident in like whether it be your makeup, your hair, your tan, that's probably going to show on stage that like
Of
you're not
course.
confident and the judges are going to pick up on that. So again, going back to what we said at the beginning, like don't be afraid to be a diva.
Pick a makeup artist for your show that you've seen their pictures. We have our list of makeup artists that we work with. There's a lot of good ones now. Back in
Yeah.
the day when I first started coaching 2016, 17, there was like one or two that nailed it and everyone else, their face was muddy. They were still getting spray tans on their face. And, there was, like Carolyn was like, I mean, all my girls would come out looking like supermodels. And I'm like, how'd that happen? Like, and then I realized, okay, the stage makeup matters. Now you've got, you've got Joey and you've got V and you've got all these great artists, LeBeau, you've got a lot of, I'm probably forgetting some, but now I less go by like the name and I go, let me see their page, right? Let me see what they do. But yeah, make sure you're booking that ahead of time. And like I said, be a diva on show day. If you don't like your tan, tell the tanning company. I know some people are non-confrontational, but you don't want to not get what you want on show day. You've, like I said, put years and months and a lot of money into this. If you want your makeup better, worst case scenario, you go back and they're like, sorry, we don't have time. Well, now you know not to use that makeup artist in the future.
Exactly. Like what is the worst thing that can happen? You ask and they say no.
Once a show starts, a makeup artist's job is done. Like it's like the opposite of my job. So like I always laugh, like I always would see like Carolyn like by the pool at like noon. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, what do you mean? I've been up since 3. I'm done working. I'm like, oh yeah, the show started.
Yeah, yep, that's
She
funny.
might,
I always see V do that too, or she'll be like fly like her flights like
yeah,
at 11 or 12. I'm like, oh, but yeah. So okay, so we're talking a little bit about backstage.
more show day stuff now. So let's get into the nitty gritty of you've got yourself backstage. You found the show. You have a couple hours to go. Um, let's talk about the suitcase.
Oh yes. So yeah, I recommend bringing a little like roller suitcase
Wheelie
just
bag. Yes.
yeah, wheelie bag, something that you don't have to carry over your shoulder. Because if you're carrying a heavy bag, putting it on your shoulder, it is likely going to rub that tan right off. So, plus it's just, the rolly bag is so easy. You don't have to carry anything. But do we want to talk about like little basics to keep in that?
Let's talk about a few things. Coaches passes. So if you're my client, I'm at your show, I'm going to be backstage. If Lexie's at your show, she's going to be backstage. She was backstage for me actually in I think
San
2
Antonio.
shows, San Antonio, right? Yeah.
Yeah, San Antonio was the last
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Because you were there for Angels, but you ended up like helping out the girls and they were very grateful. So
Yeah.
Pro Physique is usually going to have a coach at most of these shows. So we really try to be there and be hands-on. I had Brittany Hamilton at the Daytona show I couldn't be at. And then this weekend, you're going to have 10 coaches backstage
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of us.
currently.
Yeah.
But you can also purchase a coach's pass for your boyfriend, your husband, your whoever, so your buddy, that's going to help you out. But they have a rule now: you have to have an NPC card to get a coach's pass, and it's for the insurance reason.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. And I do think that we should just really quickly touch on, as I know that this question will come up, like what if you don't have your coach at your show? I think we should talk just about like how that you can be fine without your coach. Like there's been many
Oh,
instances where, you know,
I think
we
it's
we
probably pretty rare to have your coach at your show, especially if
yeah.
you're working with a coach that, um, I wish I could be at every show. I'm at a show every weekend, but it's not possible. So I'll be at all the national shows. But um, yeah, honestly, it depends on the person. Some of my clients, I'm texting them all morning or FaceTiming. Some people, I talk to them once and they're good to go, and I know I don't need to mess with them. They know they've done multiple shows. They're good to go.
Mm,
And oddly enough, none of the people that have qualified for the Olympia there, I was actually there for finals.
really.
Yeah.
That yeah, I feel like it yeah, I think a lot of people overestimate like what like by show day the hard work is done. It's really just a
Yeah.
matter of laying low, keeping stress low, just making sure you're staying on your meal structure and schedule. But at that point, like you're not going to change anything in a drastic measure. Like you don't 100% need your coach there to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, the way we write our peaking plans is I have a meal plan lined out for show day with instructions on when to eat, things to look for. Are you peeing a lot? Things like, so there's things to look for. I do think your coach should be available on show day via text or phone call or whatever. I try to call all my athletes, um, at least once on show day before the show, just to get the vibes. I notice a correlation. People that text me a lot are usually high anxiety, and that doesn't usually translate well. The people that are chill, usually that translates to the physique.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think as a coach, like we should be 100% available to that client all day. I mean, even if that means it's a different time zone and we have to wake up at a weird time or, stay up a little bit later, I think that like that is our duty as a coach to be there for that client. But, you learn the client too. And eventually, usually the more shows they do, the more comfortable they feel and the little like, they won't need as much on show day.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of that is built into the relationship leading up to the show. Um, I do daily check-ins for peak week. I'm sure you do too, right? So like we're talking to these athletes sometimes multiple times per day. I often say when the show is over, I have this like weird feeling because so like who's the last one you would have known, like Ariana Brothers, let's say, like we did like 4 shows in like a 6-week window. We literally talked multiple times a day. Then we went to Pittsburgh for her road to the Olympics, like, and then I don't talk to her for like a whole week because it's just like normal. And it's like this weird gap in your life. You like feel like something's off.
Yeah.
And it happens at every national show. I had a bunch of girls compete at North Americans who were checking in every day for months, and then now they're just back to checking in normal. And it's like, so it is a weird feeling as a coach. But that show day stuff should be kind of in place before the show. Um,
Yeah.
there are some situations where I'm really glad that I was able to be at the show where they've gotten the judging wrong, the scoring wrong, and I was able to speak to them before finals and corrected. Like the Clash last year, I talked about Savannah earlier and her suit. Well, actually, after prejudging, her tan was a mess, her suit was a mess. We got her a new suit before finals, had her get sprayed by a different tanning company, and she actually won the overall at that show at her first ever show. But it was because we were able to make some adjustments after prejudging, that if I wasn't there, probably wouldn't have got made. So I do see the value in being there when possible, but for the big picture stuff, nutrition, relaxing, when to drink water, all these things should be laid out. And then you should just be able to ask questions. I'll always talk to my clients right after prejudging, give them a plan based on, I'll be like, okay, where were you? Do you have any pictures? Okay, are we going to be in the overall? We'll have some specific plans for that. My favorite thing after prejudging is a nice big sodium packed carb meal before finals, maybe a workout. Sometimes you just feel better after a workout. So
Yeah, yeah, or it can kind of just help to ease the nerves and anxiety, especially if there's like
Yeah.
a big gap in the day. But yeah, I do the same thing right after prejudging, touch base with the athlete. And one thing I do recommend is as a competitor, if you can get like a little portable ring light to attach to your phone, that's really helpful because sometimes I'll ask clients for pictures, and
Uh,
they send me pictures in this like weird, just like lighting, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, I can't see a darn thing. So I think that and it can be hard on show day to like find an area with good lighting. So to make your life a little bit easier and make your coach's life easier, get like they sell little ring lights you can just attach to your
I've
iPhone.
seen some of the coaches backstage carrying these like light wands, and I'm like, I want one of those so bad. And I always think of it at the show, and I should probably type it in my computer right now while we're talking. Remind me later, Lexie. Let's get some
I'll
ring
text
lights,
you.
backstage ring
Okay,
lights.
perfect.
Okay, so let's get into it. You're backstage. You've had your food. Let's talk about the pump up briefly. I think, in my mind, the pump up should be like the last 20 minutes, maybe 30 if you really like to get warm. I feel like I want to bring the body temperature up. So, if we're 98 degrees normally, I'd want to be about 100 degrees. I want the body temperature up because then your blood is moving. You feel a little bit warmer. You look a little bit harder. I really, it's hard to pump up a lot on show day, especially in a bikini and heels and your hair and your makeup. Put a little blood in your shoulders, do some static holds. We've got the glute bands, for some side laterals to get your glutes a little pumped. Um, but really, it's pretty minimal. I'm not pushing like a full workout before you walk on stage. It's not bodybuilding.
Exactly. Just a little bit of band work for the shoulders, the glutes. I mean, some girls, if their upper body is too overpowering, maybe they're just pumping up their glutes. But yeah, it's very minimal.
Yeah. So give that 15 to 20 minutes. Come off stage from your first class. If you're thirsty, sip on some water. Another popular question I get a lot is, oh, well, some people are eating like sugar backstage. Should I have sugar? My response to that is usually like, if you're craving something, have it. But by the time you ingest sugar and it goes through your stomach and goes through your blood, it's not going to be in your muscles for a few hours. We are typically loading carbs going into the show. I think the people that are relying on candy and sweets backstage an hour before stage probably didn't load carbs. That's
Yeah.
just,
I feel like it's a little bit more of an older school approach too. Cause
yeah,
like I've seen coaches backstage feeding, like there was a girl in front of me at Tampa Pro, her coach was feeding her a Reese's peanut butter cup literally right as we were walking on stage.
yeah.
It was bizarre, but everybody has
So
different
I'll tell
approaches.
you where that comes from, Lexi, because I am old school at this point. I've been around for a long time. I did my first show 15 years ago, and I ate Reese's peanut butter cups walking out on stage. But here's why: bodybuilders have to do 14 poses. We're not just standing there front and back. We are flexing for literally 15 minutes sometimes. Um, so that food is in your bloodstream, is going to keep you fuller so you don't completely flatten out. A bikini competitor does not need to be carb loaded walking out on stage. It's more important to me that their core is tight.
Yeah.
I would be more worried about digestive issues from something they haven't had in a while, like a Reese's peanut butter cup. Um, so yeah, if you're going to be on stage in a class like classic physique, maybe even figure, yeah, they're, fully flexing your quads, fully, staying in those statically flexed positions. I promise you that's way different than walking out on stage, hitting a front, back, front. Maybe you walk to the back and to the front. Like, not for nothing, but the bikini division, the work is done off stage. In bodybuilding, it starts when you get on stage and you start comparing muscularity, conditioning, and posing from different poses. So that's where it comes from.
Makes
Yeah,
sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I could see that. But yeah, I think it's important backstage, don't look at so much about or at what everybody else is doing because everybody is going to have a slightly different approach, like what
right.
they're eating before they get on stage. I mean, you're going to hear some bizarre things backstage. You're going to hear some people talk
Yeah.
about how they're like haven't had water in a certain amount of time. You still hear that stuff backstage, but I think it's important to stay in your own lane and to do what you were told by your coach and not let
Yeah.
like what other people are doing get in your head.
Yeah, that's always a concern. Okay, so you're ready to go. You walk out on the stage, and I always love to quote Daraja when I talk about walking out on stage because the way she describes it is as soon as her shoe hits the stage, she just remembers to have fun.
No, I like that.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times you can tell athletes that are just trying to remember how to perform their routine. They're not in the moment. They're just basically practicing their routine on stage instead of going out there and just executing it and having fun. So when you get on the stage, smile. Remember, the moment you hit the stage, the judges are looking at you. Even if there's an athlete ahead of you on the center dot, those judges, if they don't like what they're looking at up there, they're going to look back over here. So be making eye contact with the judges the entire time,
Yep.
scanning them, walk out to the box, eye contact with the judges, and just have fun. Execute your routine. You've practiced, you've done the work. My other phrase that I say to everybody backstage, you probably heard me say this, is slow is pro.
Mm-hmm.
Pros do not rush. Amateurs rush. They run to the box, they do their poses, and they run off. And if you're at an NPC show and everyone's running to the box to hit their poses and running off, and all of a sudden somebody walks out that goes really slow, really commands attention, I promise you they're going to get looked at. They're going to be like, who is this? Okay, I want to see more of this person. So yeah, really, we'll even be at a show, Lexie, sometimes, and you'll see a girl that's not even in shape, doesn't even have the conditioning. Maybe she's not that, but you're like, wow, look at this confidence. You're like, man, this girl owns the stage.
Absolutely. From the moment you walk out, because I mean, you want to think too, for a bikini, the judges have been sitting there for a long time, right? They're probably
Yeah.
a little tired, so you want to give them something to get excited about, and
Yep.
so like captivate them within those first few moments of you being or walking out on stage. Like, don't wait until you're in the center. Captivate them from the moment you walk on stage.
All right. So that pretty much wraps it up. It's been about an hour. We've been talking about show day stuff. So um that's it. You've gone out on stage, a few things for the end of the show. If the judges are offering to stay for feedback, please, if you really want to do another show, stay for feedback. Um, it's just so much more valuable in person. You get FaceTime with the judges. They get to know you. The next time they see you, they'll say hi.
Yeah.
And you start to develop that rapport. Yeah, I know you have friends and family there, but if you're in the bikini division, you're there till the end of the day anyway. Tell your family, hey, go get a table. I'm going to stay for 10 minutes and then I'll be there.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Not every judge stays. Sandy Williamson is always one that's notorious for staying. But if you can stay and
Well,
get,
even if the judges aren't announcing that they're staying, like Tampa, like none of the judges said, hey, stay for feedback. But,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, I walked, well, we won the overall. So I was already there. But I told all my girls that at the show, you had already left, but we already know your feedback. You just need more muscle.
Yeah.
But
Well,
like,
I just went up to my room. I was still there, but
yeah, but like if you're there, just the judges, even if they're not offering it, if they're still there, like putting their stuff together, you can politely say, hey, can I just ask about, you know, number
yeah.
number 37 in class C? Oh yeah, we loved you, but your angle was off and I couldn't see your number. Like they'll just give you like just little tidbits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's so valuable. Catching them on their way out if you can, or if that's not the case, still emailing them for feedback once your stage shots are up. That's the next best thing to do. But
yeah,
yeah, I think it's very easy sometimes as a competitor. Like if you are upset with the placing, or even if you do, like you win the whole show, I think there's always, the judges are what matter most, right? The judges and your coach. So definitely get that feedback from the judges, regardless of if you like the outcome or not, because they were the ones judging you, and that's hearing their feedback is going to allow you to improve in your next show.
yeah. And I mean, honestly, if you just want to get out of there and go be with your friends and family, that's fine too. I'm not judging you or saying you shouldn't do that, but as a coach, the way I look at it, as the whole show is important. So soak
Yeah.
up every bit of it that you can. Um, Sometimes taking the lumps helps you become a better competitor.
It
Um,
sure does. And I think another thing to just make note of is, I know that especially like if it's your first show and it's local, you may have a lot of people that want to come and they want to watch you and they want to support you, and that's awesome, that's amazing. But also don't feel like you are tied down to those people
be
when
a
they're there.
diva. That
Yeah,
comes back
be
to
a
my be a
diva.
diva.
Exactly. It's your day. You shouldn't have to stress about, oh my gosh, all these people are here for me. I need to entertain them, blah, blah, blah. No,
I'm gonna
like,
get shirts made that say "Show Day Diva" so that people
oh my
just get
gosh,
in that
let's do
mindset.
it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I love that. I love that. That would be awesome.
Well, any other tidbits you want to add before we get going?
I don't think so. I think I have lots of YouTube videos too about just like things I don't tell you about show day, and so you can
Yeah,
go
and we can do more follow-up. Guys, leave a comment below if you have a question. I'm trying to answer the comments on the YouTube if you're on there. Also, please go leave a review for us if you're listening to our podcast, because it really does help us. And it kind of encourages us to do more. We're going to be doing more and more with the podcast here in the future.
Yeah, we are always open to suggestions, topic ideas. Yeah, comment on our YouTube. We would appreciate it. I try to respond to some of those too. Leave us a review. Share this episode on Instagram, like screenshot it, tag us. We would love that.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening to the Pro Physique Code. Thank you, Lexie, and we'll talk next week.
Sounds good. Bye, guys.
Bye.